Yes, folks. Today I want to contrast the difference between the loony left and what's happening in the real world. How the loony left have dragged the West into complete lunacy. And I'll also add a couple of my own personal experiences. So I'll start this off today with some recent lunacy in Australia.
This is how the world sees Ivan Milat, the smiling serial killer who never confessed. Now he's an old man inside a secure wing of Prince of Wales Hospital receiving treatment for cancer of the...
Receiving treatment for cancer. So this is how the loony left deal with serial killers. They try and keep them alive. That's insane, folks. Absolutely insane. They're wasting money keeping this guy alive. Anyway, we'll now go and contrast that with Saudi Arabia. Now folks, for those who don't know, this is the infamous Chop Chop Square in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Now I once visited there when I worked in Saudi Arabia, not to see a beheading, but I was just curious about it. And anyway, the Matawa, the local, the religious police, would round up people and force them to go and watch these beheadings. So they certainly do not try and keep killers alive. But folks, this really just shows you the real contrast between the loony left and what's happening in other parts of the world. Now let's listen to our dear leader and her touchy-feely well-being budget.
He said, it's all about finally breaking the cycles of violence, dealing with mental health issues properly, and also in this budget we deal with poverty issues too.
Yeah, I mean this is really the wellbeing focus in action, getting government agencies and departments to work together on the long-term challenges we've got, fixing those problems, acknowledging that it'll take some time, but that we do have a plan to improve the wellbeing of all our people. We've got...
Oh, that's so nice. That makes me feel so warm and fuzzy inside. They are such nice people. Now let's compare or contrast that with the well-being of some people in China, one of our major trading partners.
The spectre of unethical, illegal practices concerning organ donation has hung over China for many years, with the country heavily criticised by the United Nations, the United States, as well as the European Parliament for its use of death row prisoners, as well as prisoners of conscience, for organ transplanting. Now, a new documentary is about to blow the lid on the illegal organ trade that is allegedly worth a staggering $1 billion a year. And this is because, despite the fact that 10,000 organs are transplanted in China every year, there are only a tiny number of people on the official donor register. So this is the principal piece of evidence, or one of the principal pieces of evidence, is the fact that there's just so few people registered, and yet there are tens of thousands, or 10,000, 11,000, depending on the reports that you read, organ transplant. So the question is, where does this disparity, where does this colossal disparity in the numbers come from?
So we've heard these kind of reports before, but this documentary, you say, narrows in on some evidence?
Well, it narrows in on some evidence, narrows in on some practices, and it also indicates that it's on a state-funded level, or it's a state-sanctioned program, whereby these operations are carried out in either military or government-run hospitals, and they're carried out on these individuals who are not volunteers. They're carried out on people who apparently are still alive very often when the operations are performed without anaesthetic. And that sometimes at the end of these procedures, they're still alive and their bodies are incinerated.
Yes, folks, this organ harvesting is still going on. And I have first-hand knowledge of that because I know a guy who got an organ transplant in China. Now, recently, when I was visiting South Korea, where I used to work, I visited this old Korean guy. And he told me he got one of these transplants, and it only took him about 2 weeks to arrange it. And he told me that these organs were not solely coming from death row prisoners, but they were also coming from religious dissidents and from the homeless. Now let's listen to this left-wing cartoon on Trump firing Tillerson.
Trump has fired Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, which brings us to a segment we call Couple Things. First thing, Tillerson found out that he was fired from a Trump tweet.
He found out he got fired on a tweet. My God, that's the end of the world, isn't it? So let's go now and see how Kim Jong-un fires people.
North Korea has reportedly executed several senior officials after talks with the US collapsed. According to a reputable South Korean newspaper, those who helped arrange the latest summit with Donald Trump are among those killed.
This is the latest high-profile victim of a murderous dictator. Kim Hyok-chol was responsible for repairing relations with the West as US Special Envoy. He and several North Korean Foreign Ministry officials were reportedly killed under orders from Kim Jong-un.
I wish I could say that this was something new, but this is just a reminder of what this regime has been doing for decades in extrajudicial killings.
The reports come from a South Korean newspaper. The officials are said to have been subjected to forced labor before being killed at Pyongyang Airport in March. The men were blamed for the collapse of February's summit in Vietnam, where talks between Chairman Kim and President Donald Trump ended early without a deal. Kim's interpreter is also reportedly being held in a prison camp for making a translation mistake.
Yes, folks, that just shows you the gap between the far left and reality. Trump gets hammered for firing Tillerson by tweet. Yet Kim Jong-un fires people with guns or some other method.